Now, let's talk about chaining together adjectives. What we've learned how to do so far is to say things like a good man or the good man. The man is good. But what if I want to give multiple qualities to a noun? I don't want to just say a good man, but maybe a good and godly man. Or if I want to say something like the women are holy and happy. Okay? How do I do that? Well, you've learned how to join things together with the conjunction, and that's with the conjunction vav. And what's going to happen is whenever we want to do an attributive sort of chaining of adjectives and say something like the good and elderly man, I'm going to have to put the noun first, and the adjectives that are attributive will have to go second. And notice, in this case, I have ha'ish hatov. All by itself, it's the man, the good. Attributive adjective, ha, masculine singular, masculine singular. The man, the good is the good man. But I've got an extra adjective that I want to use to tell what kind of man I'm talking about. So I will add the conjunction vav, and then I have to add another article and an adjective to match the article and the noun here. So it's not just ha'ish hatov, but ha'ish hatov hazakein. The man, the good, and the elderly. The man, the good, and the elderly. In English, how am I going to translate that? I'm going to translate that as the good and elderly or old man. Okay? So it's giving me two attributes of the man, good and elderly. All right? Now, what if I wanted to say the man is good and elderly? What if I wanted to use an attributive adjective, a predicate adjective set instead of an attributive adjective set? What would I do? Well, remember, I can have predicate adjectives following the noun, but if the subject noun is definite, the predicate adjective will only take gender and number but not definiteness. So we're going to see these gone. And because we're getting rid of the article, the dagesh forte will go away. And all we'll have is just the conjunction vav here. Okay, so what do I have here? Ha'ish, the man, and I have to supply is, and then my predicate adjectives joined by vav. Tov v'zakein. Tov v'zakein. Definiteness on the subject noun, no definiteness on the predicate adjectives. The man is good and old. Okay? So the man is good and old. We'll jot that down. So good and old or elderly. Okay? So here these become predicate adjectives. All right. Here is another example just using a different order. I have tov v'zakein ha'ish. Good and old, the man. Just like me, Tarzan, you, Jane. I've got a copular construction here. Notice that my subject noun is definite. My predicate adjectives are indefinite. How else do I know these are predicate adjectives and not attributive adjectives? Because attributive adjectives always go after the noun they modify. These adjectives are before. So it cannot be attributive here. It has to be predicate adjective. And they're joined by the vav without the article. Predicate adjectives are never articular. So how would I translate this? The same way as I translated this one up here. Good and old is the man, or the man is good and old. So that's how you chain adjectives together in Hebrew. Now, the third type of adjective use is the substantival adjective. And remember, these are adjectives that function like nouns. Adjectives that function like nouns are substantival. Look at this example here. Halach hatov baderech. Halach hatov baderech. He walked. Who walked? Here is my subject. Hatov walked. Baderech, on the path. Notice that I have this adjective tov, and there is no noun that it follows and agrees with in gender, number, and definiteness. A substantival adjective is an attributive adjective that's missing the noun that would normally go in front of it. Okay? And when that happens, the adjective then functions like the noun. What is the noun function that this attributive adjective is taking as a substantival adjective now? It's taking the subject role. Subjects are usually nouns, and this adjective is doing what a noun normally does, which is become a subject. So I'm going to translate this as the good walked on the path. But what in the world does that mean? Well, what it means is when you have a substantival adjective, it means that the gender and number of that adjective is understood and presupposed by the speaker who uses that attributive adjective. The gender and number is going to be determined by what that attributive adjective refers to. So if it's referring to a man, then you might translate this as the good man walked on the path. Or maybe it's referring to a boy. So you might say the good boy walked on the path. Or you might be a bit more generic and just say the good one walked on the path, where whoever the one is, it's a masculine and singular one. All right? So the gender and number of any substantival adjective will be determined by what that substantival adjective refers to. So let's think about this for a moment. What if I said something like ha tova? Ha tova. Oh, that would be what gender and number? Tova is feminine and singular. So if I were using this as a substantival adjective, I would be referring to the good woman. Or I could also say the good one, just like hatov could refer to the good one, but the one I'm referring to is a feminine singular one. So you see how in Hebrew I can be a little bit more specific than I can in English, because in English the word good could refer to a man or a woman. But in Hebrew, I have to make a choice. It has to be either hatov or hatova for a good one man or a good one woman. I could also use plural forms for my substantival adjectives, can't I? So instead of hatova, I could have ha-tovim. And when I have ha-tovim, it's no longer feminine singular, it's masculine plural. And how would I translate that as a substantival adjective? The good ones, right? It's got to be a plural ones, the good ones or the good men. And then, of course, if I had ha-tovot, it would be the good women or the good ones, where those ones are feminine plural. So that's how the substantival adjectives will occur in Hebrew. In ROS 9.3, we deal with the matter of comparison. What we're going to see is that Hebrew has ways of describing two nouns from the standpoint of whether one noun has more of a quality than another, and that would be a more than kind of comparison, and also whether two nouns share a quality of likeness or similarity to one another. For the first kind, where something exhibits more of a characteristic than another, we use the min preposition, and this is called a comparative min. And when we're describing two things in terms of their likeness or similarity, we use the preposition kaf, and this is usually translated as like or as. So before we look at the first kind, let's just talk about how adjectives occur in English. There are three basic forms of the English adjective. We refer to them as the positive, the comparative, and the superlative. The positive form is the most basic form. It's the kind that, when you think of the adjective in terms of its basic meaning or semantics, it's adjectives like thick and beautiful. All right? Now, if I want to refer to someone as having the quality of thickness or beauty to a higher degree than someone else, I use what's called the comparative form of the adjective. And in English, what I do is I add the ER ending to the adjective. So thick becomes thicker, as in John is thicker than Billy, or I add the word more in front of the adjective and I don't add ER. Okay, so here I could say Lily is more beautiful than Bonnie. The superlative idea is where someone has a characteristic or quality to the highest degree or the most out of a particular set. In this case, I'm going to add the est ending, thickest, or I add most before the adjective, as in most beautiful. John is the thickest boy of all. Bonnie is the most beautiful woman in the room. Now, we're dealing with the comparative use of the adjective here, so we're going to focus on these two. But let me just make one comment about English. Why do we have these two different forms? Or maybe better put, when do we use one versus the other? The basic rule of thumb is that if your adjective is one or two syllables, you add ER to make it comparative. So thick, thicker, tall, taller. And then if it's three syllables or more, you will always want to be adding more. There are some situations where you do have two-syllable adjectives that will take the more or the most ending, as in more normal and most normal, as opposed to normaler and normalist. Okay, so do be aware of that. All right, now let's look at how Hebrew handles this. Here I have a sentence, Tova chokma mizahav. Tova chokma mizahav. Tova is my adjective. And you know that means good, and it's feminine singular. So this is the quality I'm talking about. And then I have two nouns that I'm comparing for their goodness. Chokma, wisdom, and zahav, gold. Now if you just read this sentence, Tova chokma, this is a predicate adjective. Notice it goes before the noun, and so it can't be an attributive adjective. And so it agrees with its noun and gender and number, but it comes before, so it's got to be a predicate adjective. It's saying good is wisdom. Good is wisdom. Now, if you take the meh here with the doubling dot in the zayin, that's the min preposition attached to the front of zahav, where it's attached the Marine Corps way, where the noon has assimilated into the zayin. If you were to translate this the way we normally translate the preposition min, it would make a rather nonsensical sentence. Wisdom is good from gold. What in the world would that mean? Well, chances are when you try to translate the min as meaning from, and you get a sentence that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, you need to ask yourself, is this min a comparative use of the min? In which case, you might paraphrase the min not as from, but rather as compared to. All right, so let's try that. Tova chokma, wisdom is good. Mizahav, compared to gold. To say wisdom is good compared to gold is really to say wisdom is better than gold. All right, so gold is the point of comparison. The adjective good is the quality that we're comparing, and we're basically measuring goodness from the standpoint of gold. However good gold is, wisdom is better than that. All right? So tova chokma mizahav, wisdom is better than gold. We're going to use the comparative form of good. Good becomes better, and then best for the superlative. Let's take a look at this example. I have Gadol David Mishaul. Great is David. Again, this is my adjective, and it is masculine singular. It precedes the noun David, which is masculine and singular. And so David is the subject, and this adjective is a predicate use. So I would translate just these two words together, Gadol David, as David is great. David is great. But now I have Mishaul, from Saul, min preposition attached to Saul. What in the world would David is great from Saul mean? Well, the min obviously doesn't have the sense of from. We want to translate this as compared to. So if I say David is great compared to Saul, what am I saying? I'm saying David is greater than Saul. That's what I'm saying. Okay? So that's how the preposition min can be used in a comparative way. So keep your eyes open for that sort of usage as you read your Hebrew text in your exercises and in the Hebrew Bible. The last sort of comparative min use that Ross discusses is actually not, technically speaking, the kind of comparative min we're looking at. I like to call it the elative use of the min. We see that in some of the other Hebrew grammars. Some will refer to this as an absolute comparison or an absolute comparative use of the min. And it's going to occur in sentences like what we have here. So hopefully you'll understand this use of the min as we look at an example. I have kasha ha'avodah. This is the adjective difficult. It's feminine singular. It's a predicate adjective because it comes before the noun that it accompanies. So it can't be an attributive adjective. So I need to have a copula here between the adjective and the subject noun. So difficult is ha'avodah, the work, or the work is difficult. And now I have a min preposition attached to the article plus the plural of na'ar, me ha-na'arim. If I were to translate this as from, then I would have a sentence like the work is difficult from the lads, which ends up giving you a rather nonsensical sentence. So obviously this can't be the separative sense of min where it means from. What if we try the normal comparative use of min? What would I be saying then? Difficult is the work compared to the lads. That is to say, this work is actually more difficult than lads are difficult. That doesn't really make sense here either. So what use of min are we talking about now? What we're really talking about is what's called the elative use of the min, where what we're saying is that the work is difficult too much for whatever the min is attached to. In this case, we're going to translate this as the work is too difficult for the lads. The work is too difficult for the lads. Kasha ha'ovadah me ha-na'arim. Difficult is the work, too much for the lads. All right? This is the kind of use of min that occurs in statements in the Hebrew Bible where it says, nothing is too difficult for you, O Lord. So that's a use of the min there. The final part of this section simply has to do with how to compare things for their likeness or similarity. Again, if I were writing the textbook, I probably wouldn't have put this here because this type of comparison is just completely different than the other type of comparison with the min. But he put it in here. We got to deal with it. But you already know this. We've talked about the inseparable prepositions, and kaf can be rendered as like or as. And so here I have an example of the adjective lavan, which means white, lavan, and then ka-sheleg. Ka-sheleg. Sheleg is snow, and we have the preposition kaf with the article, white like the snow. Or in our situation in English, we wouldn't articulate snow, so we would just say white like snow. I will make you white like snow. So the preposition kaf is not saying that there's any greater degree of whiteness compared to snow, but rather there's similarity, right? Snow is white, and I can make you to be white in the way that snow is white. So there's the comparison of likeness, and we use the preposition kaf for that. In Ross 9.4, we come to the matter of diphthongs. Diphthongs are situations in a language where two sounds come together. For example, in the word ouch in English, we have the ah and the oo sound coming together, ow, ow, and ouch. So it's a kind of combination sound that two vowel sounds will come together and make, or a consonant with a semi-vowel. And in Hebrew, we have the AY diphthong, and we're going to see that in Hebrew written as a pathak, yod, I, and there are going to be situations that we'll find where these diphthongs that come together, these two sounds are going to undergo contraction, and they're going to simplify to a single sound. So the AY diphthong I can contract and become an A sound, which is a sereyod. Okay? Remember the E with the happy party hat, the circumflex symbol, that is the historically long E. Now, when will this contraction occur? It's going to occur when the diphthongs undergo loss of stress. Then we'll see that contraction happen. So as an example, we have the word bayit, and bayit has the AY diphthong, I, bayit, bayit. And when it loses its stress under certain circumstances, bayit can lose its first syllable stress here, then it becomes bait. Bait. So the I has changed to bait. It's become a single vowel sound. Bait. Okay? So bayit, bait. AY becomes A. I-A. Now we also have the AW diphthong. This is, at least originally in Hebrew, an ow sound. Remember the vav we're pronouncing as a v sound now, but in Hebrew, it really probably was a w sound, ow, ow. And when it loses its stress, ow can contract and become a simple o sound, which is a holem vav. Okay, so ow becomes o. Remember the word tavich, or it would have been pronounced tawich for midst. If we wanted to say in the midst of, we would see the form toch. That is to say, the ow, the ow diphthong has become an o with the loss of stress. That's a contraction to a simpler sound. Okay? Now, the reason that Ross is telling you about the AY and the AW diphthongs contracting is because when we get to this next section in 9.5, we want you to see that the vowels sereyod and holem vav often arise originally from A vowels. Okay? So let's take a look at this chart. In Ross 9.5, he introduces us to the historical Hebrew vowel chart. And I have a handout about this, and so I'm going to walk through my handout for this last section, which is basically equivalent to Ross 9.5. Now, the vowels of Hebrew are understood to fit within a framework of three main vowel classes: the A-class vowels, the I-class vowels, and the U-class vowels. Now, what I'm showing you here and what Ross is showing you is a different way of arranging the vowels of Hebrew. When we first learned the vowels in Hebrew, we gave you a 5-vowel chart, the A, E, I, O, U chart, and I called that the simplified vowel chart. And the reason I called it simplified was because we basically took the vowel sounds that you know in the English language, and we mapped the Hebrew vowels onto the vowel system you know. But the reality seems to be that in Hebrew, in ancient Hebrew, they probably really thought of their vowels in terms of 3 vowel classes rather than 5, A, I, and U. And the following chart displays the vowels according to this 3-vowel chart arrangement. Now, remember, the Hebrew vowels do not appear by themselves, so we will be using the consonant bait to demonstrate the position of those vowels compared to the consonants. So I really encourage you to memorize this chart. We're going to basically get rid of the simplified vowel chart, and this is the chart we're going to use from here on out. And we're going to think of our vowels in terms of these three vowel classes, A, I, and U class vowels. If you will really learn this, and then you're going to understand the nature of the vowel changes that you're going to see as you notice that some vowels will go from short to long and some will go from long to short. You'll see why they change to the vowels that they do. We'll be thinking in terms of vowel class, the quality of the vowel, and vowel length, the quantity of the vowel being short or long. Okay, so let's deal with these right here. Let's begin with the A-class vowels. Notice that in the chart we have the class of vowels, the quality at the top, and they form these columns. And then the rows are consisting of the vowel length. So we have historically long vowels. These are the unchangeably long ones that use the mater. The tone long, the tone short, and then the compound shavas I've put in here just to show you that we have an A, an I, and a U class version of those, even though we don't really treat them as full vowels, but at least we can arrange them in the chart. Now, the historically long A-class vowels are Holam Vav, Sere Yod, and Kametz He. Now, the Kametz He you can imagine being an A-class vowel. The question is, why is Sere Yod and Holam Vav in the A-class column? And the reason is that, if you remember, the Sere Yod is a result of the AY diphthong, right? And the Holam Vav is a result of the AW diphthong. When these both contract, they become Sere Yod and Holam Vav. So that's why they're in the A classes, because they originate out of A class vowels formed in diphthongs that then contract to these. The tone long is the kametz. The tone short is the pathak and the segol. And I want to put the segol in parentheses here, because really, when you think of the short A-class vowel, you should primarily think of a pathak. There will be a few occasions where a segol will function as a short A-class vowel, but think more of the pathak as that one. And then the compound shava, the A-class version of that, is going to be the one that has the pathak element. For the I-class vowels, my historically long I-class vowel is the Keurig Yod, so B. The tone long is Sere, Be. And then the tone short is Keurig and Segol. Both of these are going to be used to represent the short I-class vowel. So if I have a Sere that needs to become short, well, either of these two are possible. And then my compound shava is the Katef Segol, the compound shava with the Segol element. And then for the U-class vowels, my historically long U-class vowel is a Shurik, Bu. The tone long is a Holam, Bo. The tone short is Kibbutz or Kametz Ketuf, Bu or Bo. So if a Holam ever had to go short, it could go to either one of these. And then my compound shava is the Katef Kametz Ketuf. I've got the Kametz Ketuf element in this Katef pointing. So those are the vowel classes. And what I want you to see is that whenever a vowel needs to change, if it's short and it needs to become long, it's going to slide up and down. It's within its own vowel class. So if I have a Keurig and I have to compensatorily lengthen it, what will it become? Well, it won't become a Holam, will it? It's a short I class. If it has to compensatorily lengthen, it will become the long I class, which will be a Sere. Okay, or if I had a Segol and I need to compensatorily lengthen it, it would become a Sere. If I had a Pathak and I need to compensatorily lengthen it, notice it becomes a Kametz. Okay, and by the same token, if I had one of these tone long vowels and I had to shorten them because they ended up becoming closed and unaccented, then the Holam would go to one of these two. As an example, if you remember, we had the word for all is the word kol, all or every. If I add a makef, then this is going to lose its stress, and it will now be closed and unaccented. So the Holam, being a U-class vowel, has to become short. So what do I get? Well, I'm going to get one of these short U-class vowels here. And in this case, it actually becomes kol with the Kametz Ketuf. Okay? So that's just an example. Now, one of the things that really throws some of our students off is how the long U-class vowel is actually an O sound. Okay? And then our short and our historically long could have U sounds. How is it that O's and U's can be considered the same vowel? And I'm not trying to suggest that Spanish is somehow related to Hebrew, but I wanted to show you that even in Spanish, we have situations where the vowel O, as in pelo, for hair, can show up as a U in words that are related to pelo. So the word peluqueria is a barber, a place where you get the haircut. All right, and notice that where I had an O in pelo, I have a U in peluqueria. So this O and U sound sort of merging together in a language is not completely uncommon. All right, so anyhow, I hope that helps.